Hi, I'm Maura. After 15 years of building my father's company into a $150 million empire, he handed it to my brother in front of a room full of people. No warning, no explanation, just a smile and applause like I was never there. But that wasn't the worst part. It's what they planned behind my back. The surveillance, the fake documents, the erasure of my mother's will. Why would a father erase his own daughter from her legacy? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever kept quiet to keep the peace until silence became betrayal? Tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Drop it in the comments below. The clink of silver against porcelain was almost too perfect. The chandeliers above threw soft amber light onto wine glasses and bone-white plates, while the air inside the Adair estate buzzed with the kind of energy people pretend is warmth, when it's really control. This dinner was supposed to be about me. 15 years at the helm of the company. 15 years dragging it out of quicksand with nothing but sleepless nights and a refusal to lose. The invitation had said, celebrating a legacy. I should have known. Franklin sat at the head of the table, knife in hand, smile too tight. His suit was charcoal, pressed to precision, and next to him, Grant, polished, relaxed, too relaxed. I scanned the table. The place cards had been rearranged. I was 2 seats down from where I'd been told I'd sit, no longer beside my father, but beside an investor I hadn't spoken to in months. Franklin hadn't said much to me all evening, just a nod. A thank you for coming, like I was a guest at my own funeral. He tapped his glass. The room hushed. The clinking, the laughter, the murmurs all flattened into silence that stretched like smoke. It's rare, Franklin began, to build something that lasts. Rarer still to pass it on to someone worthy. My throat tightened. He looked right at Grant. I'm proud to announce that, beginning next quarter, Grant will step in as the new CEO of Adair and Sloan. Applause erupted. Chairs shifted. Smiles stretched. Someone even whistled. I didn't blink. I smiled. Because that's what you do when your father stabs you in front of 40 people with a champagne toast. I raised my glass slightly. The wine caught the light, and I caught Grant's eyes. He didn't flinch, just smiled wider. And that's when it clicked. The guest list. The sudden rush to schedule the dinner. The way Grant had insisted on the floral arrangements. The theme. The fact that he'd flown back from New York 2 weeks earlier than planned. Because he wanted to help. He had choreographed this. Every detail. He'd scripted my humiliation down to the lighting. I excused myself. No one stopped me. In the powder room I stared at my reflection. My lipstick was perfect. My eyes weren't red. That was good. There was no room for rage yet. 15 years, I'd sacrificed everything. Relationships, health, parts of myself I didn't know I could live without. I didn't do it for applause. I did it for the name, the family, the firm. And now I was a prop, a placeholder they could retire when the new face was ready. But they'd made one mistake. They'd let me watch. I dabbed the corner of my eye, not because I was crying, but because I needed a gesture. Something human. Then I straightened my dress, turned, and walked out like nothing had happened. Back at the table, Grant was in my seat. Franklin rested a hand on his shoulder like he was christening him with power. I picked up a glass, toasted the air. To new leadership, I said, voice steady. They clinked and nodded, oblivious. But in my head, something had shifted. A lever had been pulled. A fuse had lit. They had no idea what I was about to do. I arrived earlier than usual that Monday. The air in the office felt thinner somehow, as if oxygen had been siphoned out and replaced with hesitation. My assistant didn't look up when I walked past. She pretended to be on a call, but there was no one on the line. I could hear the dead silence from across the hall. When I sat at my desk, half the folders on our legal drive were inaccessible. My admin permissions had been temporarily suspended due to restructuring, according to the system log. Restructuring. That word echoed in my skull like an insult said too politely to be questioned. Then I saw it. A file, not hidden, but placed just deep enough where only someone already looking for betrayal would find it. Leadership Transfer Protocol. That was the title. I clicked. There it was, page after page, outlining my transition into legacy advisory status, effective immediately. No signature, no consultation. It even included bullet points, reduced access to financials, executive meetings to be attended only upon invitation, and all major decisions to be deferred to Grant. It was like reading my own obituary. My hands didn't shake. They should have. But numbness settled in, thick and slow, crawling over my skin like frost on a windshield. Then something even worse occurred to me. Last week, I noticed a document I hadn't touched duplicated itself. I assumed I'd clicked too fast, but now I remembered it clearly. The name had been slightly altered, like someone had saved a ghost copy. I called in an independent IT specialist, one I trusted because he didn't know Grant, didn't owe Franklin. By mid-afternoon, he found it, a keylogger buried beneath a code layer in my email client, installed 3 weeks ago. Every keystroke, every draft, every confidential note, I had been writing to ghosts with watching eyes. "Any idea who added this?" he asked. The access trail led to Brian Keel, the junior IT tech Grant had promoted last month, to increase digital security. Of course, they hadn't just taken my seat. They wanted my thoughts before I even spoke them. I stared at the screen until my reflection dimmed into nothing. Then I backed up everything, every file, every personal note. I sent copies to Miriam, to an off-site server, to 3 encrypted flash drives. One went in my bag, the others in places no one would think to check. 16 years ago, my mother once told me, "Don't let anyone edit your story while you're still living it." She was talking about an article misquoting her philanthropy speech. Back then, I'd laughed. Now I heard it like a battle cry. By 6, I was at Franklin's office. No knocking, no scheduling. I walked in and laid a single printed page on his desk. He looked up, startled. "Maura, what are you doing?" I met his eyes. "You want war, Dad? You just earned it." I walked out before he could say a word. The air inside the building was heavier than usual, like it had been holding its breath since Friday night. Conversations thinned when I passed. Some people looked up then quickly down. Others didn't even bother. I didn't need their words. Avoidance had its own volume. Kendra stood at the elevator when I entered. She gave a polite smile, just enough to suggest everything was normal, but not enough to convince either of us. The ride to the 12th floor stretched longer than it should have, silence ringing loud between us. "It's strange," I finally said, not looking at her, "how silence can scream louder than words." She didn't respond, just shifted her bag from one shoulder to the other. In the internal legal lounge, I leaned against the counter while she made herself a cup of tea she wouldn't drink. Her hands moved with the ease of someone who had prepared a script, but wasn't sure which part of it to perform first. "You saw the transfer document," I said. Her hands froze mid-stir. "It was in the shared drive, Kendra. You had to know." Look, Maura, this isn't easy." "Did you know?" She turned slowly. "I didn't want to be involved." "That's not what I asked." A beat passed, then she lowered her gaze. "I saw the draft. I figured it was politics. I didn't think it would go this far." "You didn't think," I echoed. "Or you didn't care." "I'm just trying to stay out of it. I didn't want to pick a side." I took a step forward, voice low. "Kendra, silence is a side." She flinched. 3 years ago, she had nearly lost her job after a series of missteps in an ethics review. An internal client accused her of misusing conflict of interest guidelines. The board wanted her gone. Quietly. I intervened, rewrote the report, softened the language, made it disappear. I'd saved her. And now she stood here, refusing to even look me in the eye. "That file should never have existed," I said. "You know that. And you let them blindside me." Her jaw tensed. "This isn't just about you, Maura. People are scared. Things are shifting. I'm not the only one trying to survive this." "No," I said flatly. You're just the one I expected better from. I left before she could answer. Back in my office, I sat down and opened the surveillance logs Miriam's team had copied for me. There it was. Kendra had viewed my access logs, twice, the day before the announcement. I began making a list of names, who was still standing with me, who was already gone, and who was pretending not to notice the walls closing in. Her name slid to a column I didn't want to label but already knew. If you won't protect me, I thought, then stay the hell out of my way. That night, as I turned off my desk lamp, my phone buzzed, a blocked number. I opened the message. They're planning another meeting. You're not on the list. Again, no name, no signature, just silence. But this time, it screamed something else. War. Wednesday started quiet. That kind of quiet that isn't peace, just absence. No good mornings, no eye contact. Even the security guard barely nodded when I passed. I tapped my badge at the elevator. It blinked red, twice. On the third try, the doors opened, but my usual floor, 47, was grayed out. I rode up in silence, stomach tight. The elevator stopped at 46, one floor below where the boardroom was. That was deliberate. A junior associate stepped in, then froze when she saw me. They're in a meeting, she said softly, eyes darting toward the ceiling. You're not on the list. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My heels echoed down the hallway as I took the service stairs, bypassing protocol like they'd bypassed me. Upstairs, I pulled out my tablet and accessed the internal live stream. Every major boardroom meeting was recorded, officially for legal compliance, unofficially for control. There they were. 11 board members, Grant at the head. Franklin to his right, speaking with that calculated calm he reserved for speeches, not conversations. Given the current instability and Maura's need for rest, he said, this transition allows for continuity of leadership while respecting her contribution. My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream, to kick down the glass door and expose them. Instead, I watched. I was being written out of history with a voice wrapped in concern. 1 week ago, Owen Wade, a longtime board member, had emailed me with just 3 words. They're moving fast. I hadn't taken it seriously enough. Now I opened my inbox. His name was gone from the directory. I scrolled further. Termination notice, effective immediately, ethical misalignment. He warned me. They silenced him. Even allies were being erased. I called Miriam, my attorney, told her everything. Her voice stayed calm, but I heard the edge in it. We can challenge it, but you need to act now. Document everything. I sent her the stream, the logs, the recordings. She'd draft the injunction. I'd make sure no one could pretend this hadn't happened. In their hunger to control the narrative, they'd forgotten I still had a voice, and now I'd use it. Back in my office, I composed a company-wide message. No emotion, no dramatics, just facts, screenshots, and the one sentence they didn't expect. To all who think silence equals surrender, check again. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my inbox caught fire. I stepped into the lobby and every head turned, only to swivel away just as fast. Not one smile, not one greeting, just phones. Every screen seemed to glow with the same headline. Exclusive. Internal sources concerned about Adair executive's mental fitness. They didn't use my name. They didn't have to. My photo, a clipped image from an old conference, sat just below the bold black letters. My expression frozen mid-blink. Unreadable. Convenient. I felt the blood drain from my hands. At my desk, 2 department heads passed by and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I could feel it, buzzing at the base of my neck. I clicked the article. Paragraph 2. Several insiders have raised concerns about erratic behavior, emotional outbursts, and long-standing psychological instability. Then came the quote. Not from an employee, not from Franklin. It was mine. Lines from a therapy session, twisted out of context. I'd said, "Some days I wake up and forget who I'm fighting for anymore." I'd whispered that once, privately, into a wellness app that promised encrypted journaling and mindfulness logs. Grant had helped launch it as part of his health and safety restructuring. He'd sold it as a tool for emotional resilience across the firm. My own vulnerability had become a loaded weapon. HR wouldn't even look me in the eye. I pressed harder. Finally, one junior rep muttered that access permissions had been updated last quarter, citing executive oversight protocols. I left before I broke something. 16 years ago, my mother had stood on stage and told a crowded ballroom, "Vulnerability is strength, when it's yours to give." Today, mine had been stolen, repackaged, weaponized. Miriam read the article twice. Her fingers stayed still against the screen. "They're not playing corporate anymore," she said quietly. "This is public war." She suggested legal recourse for defamation and data misuse. I listened, but my mind was already somewhere else. They weren't trying to destroy my title. They were erasing my credibility, making me small enough to replace without question. So I did what I knew best. I spoke first. That afternoon, I recorded a short video and sent it to every department head. "I've made mistakes," I began, voice clear. "I've had moments of fear, confusion, exhaustion, just like every human being trying to hold up a legacy that weighs more than a nameplate." I paused. "But none of that justifies what's being done to me. Surviving does not disqualify leadership, and healing is not weakness. No names, no accusations, just truth." Some replied. Quiet support. Others said nothing. That night, just after 10, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside, a photograph. My mother, standing outside our first office, her arm around me. I couldn't have been older than 11. On the back, written in smudged black ink, "They buried her voice once. Don't let them do it again." No signature. But I knew exactly who the message was for. The unit was tucked in the corner of an old building in South Charlotte. Dusty cement, flickering overheads, a keypad that stuck. I hadn't been there since the funeral. The key was still in my wallet. A thin, bronze thing marked with a strip of masking tape that said, "Eleanor, personal." The storage locker opened with a groan. It was the smell that hit first: paper, mildew, a faint trace of lavender, like her. I moved boxes slowly, hands careful, until I saw it, a flat envelope wedged between two file bins, sealed, my name written in her cursive, "Private, for Mora only." I broke the seal. Inside was a copy of her will, notarized, dated July 2011. It was real, watermarked, her signature intact. I read it twice before my fingers could move again. She'd left me everything, her full share in the company, her voting rights, her stake. Every single clause pointed to me. But Franklin had said there was no will. 16 years ago, after the funeral, we'd sat in his office surrounded by floral arrangements and polite condolences. I'd asked, naively then, if she'd left instructions. He'd smiled tightly and said, "Your mother trusted me to handle it." And I believed him. I staggered back into the hallway, leaned against the cinder block wall. Grief hit like a second death, not of her, but of my own trust. Her voice echoed in my head. "Don't ever let them decide your future just because they wear a suit and say they love you." I should have listened harder. Once I could breathe again, I drove straight to Miriam. I laid the will on her desk. She read it without speaking. When she finished, she looked up. "If this holds in court, Mora, it voids the entire current distribution. All of it." "They never even tried to hide it," I said. "They just assumed I'd never look." She scanned the seal again. "You're going to need to move fast. They're not going to take this lightly. And I'm done taking it quietly." That night, a thick manila envelope appeared under my apartment door. I opened it slowly, pulse ticking like a second hand. Inside was a photo, me and my mother, arms looped around each other outside the original Adair and Sloan building. She was wearing that navy coat with the frayed cuff she never replaced. On the back, in a jagged scrawl, "She trusted the wrong man. Now do what she couldn't." No signature, but I didn't need one. I walked into Miriam's office, holding the envelope like it might combust if I gripped it too tight. The will was inside, along with the files we'd pulled from storage and the metadata to back its authenticity. We laid everything out on the conference table: facts, timestamps, signatures. "This is it," she said. Once we file, there's no walking this back. I'm not here to walk anything, I replied. By noon, the lawsuit was officially filed with the Superior Court of Mecklenburg County. My name at the top, Franklin and Grant Adair listed as defendants. Legal terms wrapped around a single truth. They had rewritten a dead woman's intentions and tried to silence the one person who remembered her voice. The press picked it up within 24 hours. One outlet ran the headline, Heir versus Father. Daughter fights for control of $150 million legal empire. Grant showed up on camera 2 shades paler than usual. This isn't about control, he said, blinking too much. It's about healing a family. I almost laughed. Franklin gave no comment. His assistant issued a brief statement. This is a misunderstanding, exacerbated by emotion. I said nothing. Because I didn't need to explain the truth to anyone. I just needed to prove it. Miriam's team wasn't finished. By the second day, they traced transactions from a private offshore account registered under a company Grant created 3 years ago. Shell companies, routing numbers, money moved in, consulting fees from Adair and Sloan into quiet accounts, and from there to at least 3 board members. Legacy bonuses, the notes called them. Miriam sat back, eyes sharp. This isn't just breach of ethics, it's wire fraud, racketeering. I didn't hesitate. I want it all in the filing. They'll settle before this goes to court, she warned. Let them try. She smiled, just a little. They picked the wrong woman to bury. Back at the office, the reaction was quieter. HR sent out a company-wide memo urging professional decorum and a neutrality protocol. They weren't choosing sides, just choosing silence. So I sent my own message, a private email to every department head. You don't have to pick sides, but don't let a lie speak louder than the truth. Some responded, some didn't. I didn't need the whole building behind me, just the ones who remembered who built it. When I got home, there was something waiting on my door, a photo taped to the wood, one I'd forgotten even existed. Franklin, Grant, and me. Christmas, years ago. I couldn't have been more than 12. We were standing in front of the firm's first building, smiling in matching coats. Someone had taken a thick red marker and slashed an X over my face. Below it, scrawled in heavy black ink, "You wanted war. Here it comes." The morning was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that made the trees outside my balcony feel posed, not living. I watched steam curl from my coffee and wondered how many people were planning my end over breakfast. An email arrived at 8:13 a.m. Subject: Confidential settlement proposal. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it was. Numbers, conditions, terms. When I did, it was almost worse than I imagined. An undisclosed financial amount, generous if you measured peace in dollars. A ceremonial title, an advisory role with no real power, a non-disparagement clause that would make me legally mute, and of course a requirement to withdraw the lawsuit. It read like a polite obituary. I printed it, walked to the fireplace, and lit a match. The flames licked up the paper like they'd been waiting. I watched it curl, blacken, and vanish. They offered money. I wanted legacy. I reached into the drawer and pulled out my mother's will. The real one. The one they'd buried like it didn't matter. I placed it next to the empty folder, then snapped a photo, just in case the fire needed a witness. At noon, my phone rang. Franklin. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I answered. "I assume you've seen the proposal?" he said, his voice even but tight. "It's a fair offer. No one walks away ruined." "No," I said, "just erased." There was a pause. Then he tried a new tone. "You want the company? Fine. Let Grant walk away clean. Let me keep the founder title. The tower bears my name. That's all I ask." I let the silence stretch until it ached. "You can't keep credit for something you tried to destroy." His voice dropped, colder now. "Be smart, Maura. This isn't personal. It's structure." I hung up. An hour later, I held a press conference. Simple. Director. No podium. Just me, a chair, and a camera. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. I'm here because my name was stolen. My work was hijacked. My mother's voice was silenced. This isn't about control, it's about integrity. The statement aired that night. Some investors withdrew, but most held. The media coverage turned, not in my favor, but toward balance. That evening, a courier brought a single document to my door. Franklin's resignation as chairman, notarized, signed, a post-it stuck to the corner. You win, but the name stays. I stared at the note and said out loud to no one, "We'll see." No cameras followed me through the lobby. No headlines screamed my name. The front desk barely glanced up when I passed, and for the first time in months, no one whispered when I entered a room. The lawsuit was over. The fire had burned through every lie, every manipulation. All that remained was ash and the quiet crackle of something rebuilding. My face no longer dominated news cycles, but my presence didn't need to. It settled in the walls now, in every corner of the company that once tried to erase me. They knew I was still standing. The board met on a gray Thursday afternoon. The agenda was short, but the second item mattered more than anything else they'd voted on in years: restoring my mother's name to the founder's plaque. It passed, 6 in favor, 2 abstained, no objections. Franklin's name would remain. But now it came second. I stood in front of the new plaque by myself. I let my fingers trace the letters. Eleanor Shipley. For a long moment I said nothing, but inside something finally exhaled. She was never meant to be an afterthought. Not anymore. No one had heard from Grant. His phone was disconnected. His office packed up by someone else. Whispers said he'd gone overseas. Others said rehab. A few believed he was waiting out the charges. I didn't care. What mattered was that he was gone. A package arrived that afternoon. No return address. Inside was a photo, torn at the edges. Me and Grant, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting on the front steps of our childhood home. I held a popsicle. He held my hand. There was no note. Maybe it was an apology, or maybe it was a threat dressed as nostalgia. Either way, I slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk without a word. I visited Franklin's old office the next day. The nameplate was gone. The room had been emptied, stripped of pride and pretense. I sat in his chair for a second, spun it once, then stood and left it untouched. I didn't need it. My desk waited across the hall. Same view, same skyline. But this time, it felt different. The city lights outside no longer pressed down on me. They shimmered with potential. I wasn't safe. I wasn't healed, but I was still here. I opened my recorder and spoke into it softly. We don't win by being louder. We win by refusing to be erased. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and leaned back. This wasn't about thrones. It wasn't about revenge or victory. It was about rewriting the rules in my own voice. Sometimes reclaiming your voice means letting go of the one that tried to silence you. If this story has taught me anything, it's that legacy isn't something we inherit. It's something we choose to protect, even when it costs us comfort, even when it's family. And no, it's not about revenge. It's about saying, I was here, and I mattered. If you've ever felt pushed aside, overlooked, or made to feel small, I hope my story reminds you that quiet strength is still strength. You don't need to shout to be powerful, but you do need to stand. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for something that should have been yours all along? What did you learn? Let's talk in the comments. If this video spoke to you, drop a 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like it, I'd love to hear why. We grow through dialogue. If you made it this far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story that might just reflect a piece of your own.